I'm Wendy Rae. I'm a partner in the corporate group at Allens. I'm here with David Irvine AO, the current chairman of the Foreign Investment Review Board and the former Director General of ASIO and ACIS. Thanks, David.
Pleased to be here.
In terms of national security issues, there's been increasing focus on those in recent times, and there's been speculation since your appointment and the establishment of the Critical Infrastructure Centre that those national security issues are having increased weight as part of the national interest considerations. Can you talk us through whether there's been a change in approach from the government when assessing foreign investment applications from a national security perspective, and where would you expect to see those types of issues arising?
National security has come into greater prominence in Foreign Investment Review Board consideration in recent years, simply because states are privatising many elements of our critical infrastructure, and because those elements are critical and because they do have an impact on national security, for example, the continuity of your water supply, the continuity and reliability of your electricity supply, and so on, then the Foreign Investment Review Board has had to devote greater attention to those issues than it needed to do in the past. At the same time, the government has given, and not necessarily as a result of the foreign investment process, but the government has had to give consideration to the security and the reliability and the resilience, if you like, of our critical infrastructure generally. So, and its resilience against destructive activities by cyber means, by whatever. And that was, I think, the prime reason why the government set up the Critical Infrastructure Centre, in order to assist the government to work with our critical infrastructure operators to improve their resilience generally against any form of threat, be it an internal threat or an external threat. And but as a result, the Critical Infrastructure Centre is now also advising the Foreign Investment Review Board, given its developing expertise in that area.
Well, thanks for drawing that link, because I was going to ask you about how the Critical Infrastructure Centre and FIRB are working together. Perhaps could you just elaborate a little bit more on what happens in practice there?
Well, let's remember in the first instance that the role of the critical infrastructure is to develop resilience of critical infrastructure across the board, and not simply critical infrastructure which has a foreign investment component. We're working very well. They're still new, they're still starting out. But we don't work only with the Critical Infrastructure Centre. We can work directly with the Department of Defence if their interests are involved, with ASIO if there are particular sorts of national security interests involved, or with a variety of other expert government agencies. Probably the one we work most closely with is the Tax Office.
And in terms of tax, is that there seems to have been an increased focus on tax considerations as well. So how does that work in practice?
Essentially what happens is that investment proposals are considered, particularly in terms of the structure and financing of the investment proposal, are considered by the Tax Office, and they provide advice to the Foreign Investment Review Board as to whether there should be particular conditions attached and so on. And that, I think, brings me to another point that people don't always understand. It doesn't matter whether it's a competition issue, a tax issue, or a national security issue. The attitude of the Foreign Investment Review Board, certainly since I've been on it, has been that doesn't, if there are problems, it doesn't automatically mean that the investment is denied. What we also do, and we're doing increasingly, is trying to talk as early as we can with the potential investors and sometimes the potential sellers to work out how some of these potential problems can be mitigated. And so it's a very constructive process designed, hopefully, to get a good outcome, which is investment into Australia. And so you will find that on taxation issues, for example, we might include conditions that say you should be aware of these particular tax issues. In relation to items of national security interest, it might be that they would need to structure or organise the way in which the activity is, or the investment is subsequently operated. Each case is different, which is one of the reasons why you can't have a standard set of rules that just apply across the board.
Thanks, David. And I think you drew those themes today at the CEDA conference as well, and encouraging people to get in early and have discussions if they feel like they've got a particularly contentious proposal. Well, thanks very much for your time, David.
It's been a pleasure talking to you.